A Parent Wins, an adventure of a lifetime. A global expedition dedicated to collecting stories of environmental and cultural preservation while conducting marine research aboard sailing vessel Resilience.
It's really crazy that we've been sailing for a year already, because time flies, but also if you look back on where we were a year ago, I mean, we were on the other side of the country, first of all. It's all just been a whirlwind. I really did fall in love with the water here on the East Coast, and it definitely is different coming back here via boat and via the lens of this project, especially comparing it to the Pacific Ocean now, because I've spent so much time on the Pacific now. That's where I've spent the majority of my sailing experience.
It feels like I'm a little fish that was born in these waters and went out to sea and came back. It just feels like almost primal returning to these places. I grew up coming to Maine when I was a kid. For a big portion of time, I always remember those times really fondly. It's where I learned how to row a boat. It's where I learned how to drive like a dinghy and drive an outboard and start the outboard and do all that. It's also the place where I learned how to sail on big boats and navigate in fog. So Maine's a special place for me, and I've been looking forward to making it up here. Coming up from Portland north sort of is like this weird ghost of a experience where I have these memories, but they're so long ago and they're so faint, but I recognize like this harbor, or I recognize that smell, and I have this familiarity with all the lobster boats. I forgot about how many damn lobster pots there are.
We're now kind of heading east. Like the whole Maine coast is really, when you get up here, it's almost a west to east sort of movement as opposed to north to south. And yeah, Stonington, Brooklyn, where the Brooklyn Boatyard is, where there's a wooden boat school, and also some really interesting folks that work in the forestry and sort of land preservation world up here in Maine. So hopefully we'll catch up with them. Looking forward to it. The weather's good. Just need to not hit a lobster pot. That's what's happening right now.
So we were introduced to this guy named Zach from a couple of different friends, and Zach has been responsible for introducing us to so many people in Maine. Included in those folks, though, that he's introduced us to are Ben and Karen. Ben, for almost his entire career, has been involved with land trust and preservation work throughout coastal Maine. Karen is into forestry.
One of the things what's wonderful, frankly, about what's going on in Maine is the coastal conservation work is moving inland more, looking at watersheds, connecting inland to the sea, and then the work of groups like ours, and there are a lot, that are doing work, are thinking watershed, not just big forests. We hold 1 million acres in conservation easement, my group.
Back when I started, there were basically no local land trusts, small local land trusts.
Right.
There were, the number was there was sort of two that I'm not even sure they would today. I don't even know what they were. I never quite figured it out. We actually, Maine Coast Heritage Trust helped create over in Castine what I think was kind of the first, what today would seem like a normal local land trust. Mm-hmm. And it's gone to close to 100.
he did this wonderful course and invited me and a few other colleagues of his to talk about how conservation in the North Woods or along watersheds in Maine was really enriching the coastal environment.
Right.
And what we're hearing, and I first became more aware of it listening to, learning about studies out west, is there's this circulatory system between the forests and the ocean, where the forest, drops its leaves and its needles and little pools in the rivers and streams, and then those break down, and all the my organisms, break it down, and then all of that carbon and all those nutrients go into the ocean, and then the fish go up the ocean, and then the various
Up the
otter,
rivers.
up the rivers,
Yeah.
and the otter and eagles and hawks and foxes and whatnot eat the fish, and it's all like bringing nutrients from the ocean up, and then to sort of also know that indigenous people here moved from the coast inland and back and forth, depending on the season and their needs and their life. Together, there's a lot going on. But the fact that the sort of this recognition of this integrated system of the watersheds, the rivers, the ocean, that it is all connected. It's not just the coast, the thin line here, or it's not just up north. It's the whole system is really, I think, strengthened over the last 5 to 10 years here in Maine.
We went on this little island right next to our anchorage. We were stuck in Brooklyn, and we want to explore. And this little island is a perfect example of some of the stuff that people have been preserving here, and the people that we're meeting with are responsible for it being there. I grew up a lot sailing here, and I think the Northeast, and specifically Maine, is a big inspiration for me and what I did back home in Charleston, teaching wooden boat building to kids and teaching them about our maritime heritage and culture, and trying to connect students of all different backgrounds with the water. And so to come to Brooklyn, where you have the wooden boat school, and then you have Brooklyn Boatyard, which is like a real deal wooden boatyard. Because we were stuck with the fog, we stayed around a little bit longer, and we got to meet, in addition to Ben and Karen, we got to meet Steve White.
My name is Steve White. I used to be the owner of Brooklyn Boatyard. I am now a principal of Brooklyn Boatyard. I've passed on my presidency. The interest in continuing to build wooden boats started, I think, here at Brooklyn Boatyard. What makes them special is a lot of different things to me, and one of them that you touched on is just going from a tree that's growing out of the ground to creating something that has a different kind of utility and usefulness is a fascinating thing, and all the layers that are involved in doing that. I mean, actually just cutting the tree and milling the tree and all of that—that's this whole industry.
Right.
And then buying the wood and creating it, and then how you do it. And my father was, from the era when it was all plank on frame construction, but started getting into, using adhesives and glues to
Cold
put
molding.
boats together, and then I sort of got into the cold molding.
Okay.
The town of Brooklyn is interesting because it actually has 5 harbors. There are a lot of waterfronts here, so the waterfront for me was mostly recreational use. And I grew up here in the boatyard as a kid, running around the boatyard, and we also lived on Benjamin River,
Right.
on the water, so I spent a lot of time, messing around boats. The development of the waterfront has always interested me in a lot of different ways, as to how it gets used, why and where it gets used, and what changes over time, and whether you're a commercial fisherman or whether you're just walking around on the beach as a clam digger, which I did for a summer, tried to make a living doing that, which could not do. All my friends could, but I couldn't dig a clam.
Right.
Some people can, some people can't. I can't. All of that exposure to the ocean, however it is, like it's commercial fishing or sailing a sailboat or clam digging or mussling or anything like that, does lead you to spend a lot of time on the water and in the environment that you quickly discover it's not just about sailing, or it's not just about catching a lobster or anything else, but it's also about the birds that are coming through here that are here in the summertime, they're not here. In the winter, where do they go? Those kind of questions and that interest for almost any reasonably intelligent person. It's hard not to start chasing those questions down for yourself and wondering what it's like.
Yeah.
And they get focused differently. My brother and I are very different about how we look at the ocean and the water around us here in Maine. I spent a lot more time sailing and racing sailboats and across the Atlantic and things like that. And he no interest in sailing at all, but he's
Been lobstering.
dumped more water out of his boots than I've sailed on in my life.
Right.
And he has some amazing knowledge about the animals that live in the ocean. So it's endlessly fascinating if you look close enough. That's the thing. You have to slow down and look close enough to see it. And
Right.
one of the great things about boats is that, for the most part, they aren't very fast.
People here are definitely connected with the water in a really significant way. No matter really your background, whether you're in conservation or you're a lobsterman or woman, it is the identity, I think, of the towns here. But it also is another example of how a community is partially identified, if not completely identified, by the natural environment.
People here in Maine have more of a connection to the land and sea than I've seen in other places, or at least in other westernized places. And I think it's really true that comes from a lot of the industry here being so reliant on nature, but it also, because they rely so much on nature, I think it has incentivized them to really want to protect their resource that they are living off of.
Where are we going? We're in Brooklyn right now, and we've been here for a few days. We were planning on being here like maybe one night, but we've been socked in with fog and bad weather and so on. And now we're still in really, really thick fog, but we need to keep on going east down the coast, what most people think of as north. So hopefully the fog will be decent enough that we can see crab pots. That's what I'm really worried about. And if things go well, we'll make it all the way to like Bar Harbor or Winter Harbor. If things are not awesome out there, then we'll have to stop somewhere between. My kind of goal is at least to make it to Southwest Harbor, which is the closest harbor that's like a decent harbor in Mount Desert Island, or on Mount Desert Island. So it's crazy foggy out. We just started the engine. We're about to pull at the anchor.
The anchor doesn't work, and it could be the same issue we were having before, where the switch, I don't know what's happening.
We're trying to figure out what's going on. The windlass motor is leaking hydraulic fluid. There is smoke in the engine room. So it may just be a hydraulic thing going on. But it did shut off the main engine, and so we're just trying to figure it out. And we're trying not to leave the safety of a great, beautiful boatyard that's right over there without being prepared. So we'll see what happens.
After probably a few hours, I got the part that was really the symptom. I got that fixed and put it all back together and put fluid in. We started things up. Seemed like it was running fine, kind of stable. So we took off.
It's working! Woo!
We took off and it was actually okay. We had Kira at the bow and then Brooke and I on either side of the cockpit looking for lobster pots. It was fine to begin with, but then the fog got denser and denser and denser. And the lobster pots, we started stumbling.
Yesterday was crazy. Yesterday was probably the most intense day I've ever had out on the water. Lobster pots everywhere, to be expected. It's Maine, but still it's something that we're getting used to because it's not really something you see anywhere else. It was so disorienting. At one point, we also hit a trap or two and Trip had to jump in the water.
I think we might have had 4 lobster pots. Our rudder comes straight down. A lot of boats have an angled rudder or an angled skeg. Ours is just straight down. So it's like this hook going through the ocean and grabbing anything it possibly can. We get them off, we get it all taken care of. So we're just floating out there. We have the engine off at this point. And I climb out of the water and back onto the dinghy. I'm freezing cold. And as soon as I get in the dinghy, I hear, so that's a boat in the fog sounding so close. And they clearly, or likely at least, could see us on radar, see something. We get back going and we're still dodging lobster pots. I mean, to the point where we'd have to turn for a lobster pot, turn for a lobster pot, turn for a lobster pot, where I felt like we were going in a circle at one point.
Probably the most intense day I've ever had out on the water.
I feel so happy to be here.
I'm so wet.
I feel like I want to cry a little bit.
The day after, we got into Southwest Harbor after this big foggy day and got the anchor down, but we didn't go to shore. It seemed almost impossible to take the dinghy ashore with how much fog there was, and it was just wet.
Yeah. So everything is soaked.
So the day after we arrive, we actually have some visibility. And I'm not talking a lot, like I'm talking like we can see something. We ended up going for this incredible hike.
I can see Brooklyn over there. It looks really foggy. Here.
For us, I think, seeing the mountains and seeing the land up here, it was such a sweet view of what this part of Maine, at least on the coast, looks like. And it was not only sweet to see where we had been in all that fog that we couldn't see before, but also a big idea that has been building as we come into Maine is the connection of land and sea. And so to see from this mountaintop, for me at least, and be able to see how that relationship is built physically with the ocean was just really, it was stunningly beautiful. I mean, absolutely gorgeous. I feel like we just got to Maine. We really just got resilience to Mount Desert Island, which is close to as far north as we're going to go. We just started meeting people, but we still have so many more people to meet. Over the next few weeks, we'll be meeting with scientists, lobstermen and women, people that are running organizations here that are doing other preservation work, and I can't wait to see what we learn from them. If you want to access more content, consider joining our community on Patreon. You can find details in the video description. Thank you so much for watching.